There are so many changes that hit Marvel Snap this week, it's kind of insane. In this video, I'm going to explain why that's such a good thing, but also why that might not be a good thing. The meta is pretty stale. At time of recording, there hasn't been a balance patch in a little bit of time. I think you're looking at a month or two. That didn't age so well. Marvel Snap's release date is less than 4 weeks away, and Second Dinner just dropped a bombshell of an update on us, shaking up the meta entirely. Mr. Negative nuked Baron Mordo. Insane now? Shockwave. Still pretty underwhelming. Sorry about that, Shockwave. I still love you, baby. Along with the balance changes came a large collection of updates, including an update to the weekly challenge system, so fewer daily challenges are now required to complete your weekly challenge each week, and longer wait times while queuing for a match to try and ensure that you get a better match. And hopefully, that means there'll be less bots around. Less cheating, backstabbing, leader dodging bots. The game also doubled the amount of deck shots, a feat that took Hearthstone several years to accomplish. Look, scrolling is hard, okay? I don't know where the mouse wheel even is. But also a host of UI updates that make the game feel just that little bit more polished. Well, at least when it's working. Which for the first few hours after release it wasn't. Second Dinner actually tweeted about that so that their service provider went down. Look, it doesn't matter, the game's in beta. As long as it's smoothed out for release, I don't really care. I mean, bugs are par for the course on new releases these days, like fully fledged AAA titles that have been released. So things going wrong in closed beta, like, sure, that's fine. A bunch of cards and locations have new effects and voice lines. And my personal favorite fix is actually the Bifrost, which now moves all cards at once rather than one card at a time. Look, I'm going to be real with you. I used to actually hate the location of the Bifrost, not because of its effect, but because I used to dread the animation turn coming after turn 4 and one card moving, then the next card moving, then the next card. It felt like it took all day. Very much appreciate that change. Now, chances are, if you are invested in Marvel Snap like I am, you've known about these updates for days. In fact, you've probably already seen a bunch of awesome videos from the other Marvel Snap creators on the updates. I'm sorry, unfortunately, these videos take a long time to produce. I'm not able to get update videos out quite as quickly as that. But I figured that rather than giving my probably not that unique take on how these balance changes are going to change the meta and how everything's going to be different after the patch, instead, I'd like to talk about the game from a bit more of a macro perspective. I want to talk about the philosophy of these changes and how I see them affecting the game moving forwards. What can we learn about the way that Second Dinner is going to keep this game alive? Last week, I released a video about all of the changes that I believed Second Dinner really could do with making in order for the game to be successful when it comes out. And by and large, with this patch, they've addressed quite a few of those issues. The first most important thing that they've changed, of course, is the cards themselves, though frankly, I was surprised by the extent of the changes. 23 cards were changed or updated. Given that there are around 172 cards currently in the game, that's 14% of the cards that just got switched up. That is a significant meta shakeup and could just be a one-time thing unless this is Second Dinner's plan to keep the game fresh moving forwards. Nerfs and buffs are particularly interesting in digital card games as it's one of the key areas that distinguishes them from the real-life board game counterparts. Having the ability to change the text or numbers on a card that you already printed is huge and a great way to keep the game balanced and to keep the game fresh moving forwards. But at what cost? With every update, with every card changed, the game becomes just that little bit less familiar. Now, I know I'm drawing a lot of comparisons to Hearthstone when I talk about Marvel Snap, but it just makes sense because that is the easiest game to compare Marvel Snap with. It was made by a lot of the same developers, and it's the game that popularized this type of card game. Hearthstone had its basic set of cards, its pre-expansion cards, if you will. There used to be a philosophy in Hearthstone where these cards were the core set, always in the game moving forwards. That meant that if a player returned after a couple years of not playing, yes, there would be a lot of new cards in the pool to explore and experiment with, but there would also be the old favorites: Fireball, Voidwalker, Animal Companion, Wild Growth. These cards were the game. However, eventually Hearthstone decided to move to a new formula and have a rotating core set that changed every year. In some ways, this was a great change. I believe the core set was free for all players that logged in, so you'd always have a place to start when building your decks. And also, for the more dedicated players, they did get that meta shakeup year after year. The downside was that more casual players, the type that would only log in once or twice a month, or maybe even only once or twice a year, they'd log into Hearthstone and the game would be completely alien to them now. Azure Drake, that was originally in the game, then it was banned for being too powerful, then it was back, but has an extra health. Now it's a 4/5. It used to be a 4/4. That can be confusing for players that don't log in every day. Now, while this type of change is great for players that return to the game every single day, it can create a barrier preventing returning players from enjoying the game quite as much. If a returning player jumps into Constructed, grabs their old favorite deck, plays it on the ladder, and is confused as to why the stats have changed on a bunch of the cards, and maybe they don't even realize the deck doesn't work anymore, that can be disheartening for the player. It can make them not want to come back. Their collection that they'd collected, maybe bought packs for, etc., that collection that felt like it belongs to them, has been changed so much that it doesn't feel like theirs. Which brings me to the final issue with consistent balance changes in a game like Marvel Snap, and that is the ethical side of changing your collection. You see, in Hearthstone, players open packs, but they can also choose to spend a resource called Dust to craft the specific card that they want. If a card gets nerfed in Hearthstone, players have a couple weeks to turn that card back into Dust and essentially get a full refund. Not a bad system, but how does that translate to Marvel Snap? Well, currently, as there is no way to choose what order you unlock the cards in, it doesn't seem like so much as a problem. If they were to introduce a wild card system where players could occasionally choose a card to unlock, check out last week's video for more information on that, then there might be an issue. Imagine finally being able to unlock Mr. Negative because you've used up your wild card on him only for him to get nerfed the next day. Ouch. Then again, that being said, it can feel pretty bad for the players that did finally unlock a card in the current system just before it finally got nerfed. In Hearthstone, Blizzard have even more problems than that, as they've more recently introduced diamond cards, which players can pay real-life money to unlock this rarest version of the card. A card called Drakthar was available for $25, and it was too powerful, which meant Blizzard had to nerf it. And as you can imagine, that caused some problems. I believe all players that owned Diamond Drakthar were awarded 3,000 in-game gold to make up for the spending, but even so, it's a messy situation, and not one that Second Dinner want to be repeating with Marvel Snap. But now let's stop and take a moment to talk about the good. And for what it's worth, I think there's more good than bad. Chances are balance patches to this degree are not something that we're going to see that frequently, although selfishly, I hope that we do. A big shakeup in the game like this should be enough to change the meta dramatically and change our day-to-day gameplay experience. Not only that, but it's worth pointing out that some of the changes being made over time in Marvel Snap are beginning to set a precedent. For the longest time after launch, Hearthstone only balanced cards by nerfing them in order to keep the more powerful decks in check. Mr. Negative decks too powerful? Just nerf Mr. Negative. Magic and Sarah being seen too often on the ladder? Just nerf them. However, that's not exclusively what Marvel Snap is doing. Hulk, Arrow, and Abomination are among the cards that weren't seeing much play, so Second Dinner gave them more power. Hulk and Abomination are both beginners cards, so's Jessica Jones, and these cards all got some love. They're still being balanced to try to make them playable, even though they're some of the first cards that you get. Hulk at 12 power is now a legitimate pick over Magneto in certain decks, and I'm not just talking about Patriot, but other decks too. Maybe you don't want Magneto's move effect, and now Hulk has the same power, put him in instead. The fact that Second Dinner choose to use buffs in addition to nerfs is a great thing. Having a player's cards get more powerful is a very awesome feeling. It's going to encourage players to play previously neglected cards like Ronan the Accuser and jam them into decks to see if now they work. And in doing so, there could be some really fun, cool new strategies coming out of the woodwork. It's also worth pointing out that by buffing so many 5-cost cards, actually making a big thing in the blog post about the fact that so many 5-cost cards are being changed, indirectly nerfs Magic and Sarah, who until now have been the prevailing 5-drops in the entire game. Power is relative. If you had 100 cards in the game and you buffed 95 of them, essentially you're nerfing the other 2. And I think that's what's happened with Magic and Sarah here. Now, we still don't know how often new cards are going to be added to the game after the game launches. I'm still hoping that we get a lot more than we've seen pre-launch. But regardless, having the meta be shaken up quite like this by Second Dinner is a very promising and exciting thing. At least in my opinion, it could go a long way to keep the game fresh, even if cards are coming a little bit more slowly than we'd like. But what do you think? I'd love to know whether you think this recent balance patch was good, too much, too little. Where do you stand on this? And hey, if you made it to the end of the video, what did you think of it? I'm still pretty new to making Marvel Snap content. I'm going all out on this. I'd love some feedback. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.